Okay guys, it's time for math. Go ahead and open today's packet, Friday, May 1st, and open to the first page. You have an anchor chart that looks just like the one I have on the board. Go ahead and tear that out of your packet, and then also tear out the second page, which is the time conversion chart. The reason why, so tear both of those out, and we will look at those first. The reason why I gave you both of those is that today's lesson doesn't actually introduce units of time, because you've been learning units of time ever since you were in, I don't know, at least first grade, maybe even kindergarten. So we're just going to quickly go over the units of time, but most of this lesson is going to be spent converting time. So we're not having a separate time introduction, or time units introduction, and a separate time conversion. We're doing it all at once because you already know all the units of time. You've been learning them since, like I said, since first grade. So really quickly, let's just go through the units. So this chart goes from smallest and then gets bigger and then starts over again on the second row. So it's not like a big circle. It's just one row from smallest to largest, and then the next row from smallest to largest. So let's just look at these really quickly, and we will go in order. So the smallest unit of time is a second, or at least that we'll be talking about is a second. So we can see that we have the minute hand on the 12, and then we have the red second hand that is only moved once. I'm sorry, just kidding, they're all the same. But the amount of time it takes for the second hand, that usually red, my clock doesn't have a second hand, otherwise I'd show you on there. But the amount of time it takes this red second hand to move just once is 1 second. Remember, the second hand doesn't move from the 12 straight to the 1. It moves 5 times between each whole number on the clock. Because, and we'll talk about this a little more in a minute, there are 60 seconds in 1 minute. So, this red second hand, excuse me, moves 60 times to get all the way back around to the 12, and that is 1 minute. The next size, or the next, I was cleaning the board, but I didn't do a good job right there. The next unit is a minute. A minute is the amount of time that it takes the minute hand, not the hour, so this long black hand, to move once. And remember, just like before, the minute hand doesn't move straight to the 1, it moves 5 times. Just like the second hand, it just takes a little longer, because this second hand has to move all the way around before the minute hand can move once. And, as we should know, there are 60 minutes in 1 hour, so this minute hand has to move. It takes, this minute hand has to move all the way around for there to be a new hour, and that is, there are 60. It moves 60 times in 1 hour. Next, we have an hour. An hour, I'm going to add it in here. So an hour is where we have that other shorter black hand. Okay? So we can add that hour hand in. Go ahead and do that on your anchor chart, because we have the long minute hand that moves around 60 times in 1 hour. We have the long red second hand that moves 60 times in 1 minute. And now we have the shorter hour hand. So an hour is the amount of time it takes for this minute hand, or for this hour hand to move from one number to the next, not all the way around. Because, so the second hand has to move from the 12 back to the 12, that's 60 times in 1 minute. The minute hand has to move from the 12 back to the 12, and there are 60 of those in 1 hour. 1 hour is not the amount of time it takes for the hour hand to go all the way around, it's the amount of time it takes from the hour hand to go from number to number. Now there are 24 hours in 1 day. So that means on this clock, that hour hand doesn't go around once in a day, it goes around twice. The next size is we have a day. A day is the amount of time, like we said, it's 24 hours, so it's the amount of time it takes for this hour hand to go from the 12 to the 12 twice. Not once, because that's only 12 hours, but all the way around twice. 12 plus 12 is 24. A day, there are about 30 days in 1 month. We know that there's not exactly 30 days because some months have 31 days, some months have 30, and then 1 month, February, has 28 or 29 in a leap year. So there are about 30 days in 1 month. You won't be doing any days to months or months to days conversions because that number can change. The amount of days in a month can change. So don't worry about that. You won't have to convert days to months or months to days. Now months, that's the next size. After we get through about 28, 30, or 31, or in some years 29, then we've got a month. There are exactly 12 months in 1 year. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There are 12. We know what they are. January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. After we've gone through 12 months, then we've had a year. A year is the same as 365 days, unless it's a leap year. There will be times where you have to convert days to years to days or days to years. Now, all you have to do there is just imagine don't worry about a leap year. Just assume that they're talking about a regular non-leap year and they want 365 days. A year is the same as 365 days. It's also the same as 12 months. So this is the chart that just tells you the units of time and the order from smallest to largest. So the smallest unit is a second, then comes a minute, then comes an hour, then comes a day, then comes a month, and the largest is a year. Okay, so now go ahead and put that to the side and get out your time conversion chart. Okay, so now you should be looking at the units of time conversion chart. Make sure you've torn it out of your packet. Do not send it back to me. And let's look at what it says. We already had a little bit of a conversion chart on this sheet, but this one is a little easier to read and to find the units. Also, they've added a unit, which is a week. A week on here would fit between the day and the month. So it would be seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks would be right here, then months, then years. So let's look at this conversion chart. And first we see that 60 seconds, which is abbreviated as just an S, is the same as 1 minute, which is abbreviated as MIN. Make sure you're paying attention to these abbreviations because you need to know them. So 60 seconds is the same as 1 minute. There are 60 seconds in 1 minute. There are no units of time in 1 second because seconds are the smallest. So that means we will never be never be multiplying by the number of anything in a second because they're the smallest, so nothing else fits. Next, we have 60 minutes in 1 hour, which is abbreviated as HR. Pay attention again to those abbreviations. So there are 60 seconds in 1 minute. There are 60 minutes in 1 hour. And now we know that there are 24 hours in 1 day, which is abbreviated as a D, just a lowercase d. Make sure that you are paying attention to whether these abbreviations are lowercase or capital. Otherwise, you're talking about something different altogether. So there are 24 hours in 1 day. We know that there are about 30 days in 1 month, but we're not going to worry about that conversion because you won't really have to do it in this lesson. Now, this is the next one. There are 7 days in 1 week, which is abbreviated as WK. Now, we know that because we know there's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So there are 7 days in 1 week. Remember, 1 week would come between the days and the months on this chart right here. If you want to take your pencil and you want to write right here, weeks, 1 week, that is fine. Now this is something we will be looking at in this chapter, which you may not have realized. There are 52 weeks in 1 year, which is abbreviated as YR. Now that is something. There are 3 different things that we're going to be looking at where you might have to convert to years. But this is helpful because if you're trying to figure out how many weeks are in a year, you don't have to go from weeks to months to years. Or if you're trying to figure out how many days are in a certain amount of year, you don't have to go from days to weeks to months to years, because you already know from this chart that there are 52 weeks in 1 year, 12 months, which is abbreviated as MO, in 1 year, and 365 days in 1 year. So that means if you're trying to go from weeks, months, or days to years or backwards, you don't have to go from years to months to weeks to days, because you already know there are 365 days in 1 year. And we will look at what that means when we get to the lesson. Don't forget, if you want to write this note to yourself, it's on the back, but if you're looking at it, remember, big to small, you multiply. So that means if you're going from minutes to seconds, hours to minutes or seconds, days to hours or minutes or seconds, weeks to days, make sure you're writing this, or hours, or minutes or seconds, months. You would not go from months to weeks or days because there's not always the same amount of weeks or days in a month. But if you are going, you know what? No, we wouldn't go from months. No, we wouldn't go from months to anything because there's not a certain amount of days or weeks, which means we can't figure out a certain amount of hours or minutes or anything else. So, therefore, if you're going from months, I just did the same exact thing, sorry, years to weeks or days or hours or minutes or seconds. Remember, that means you can go from years to days without stopping at weeks, because you know there are, also years to months. Forgot about that one. So from years to months, or years to weeks, to days, to hours, to minutes, or to seconds. Any of those you will multiply. If you are going the opposite direction, which means you are going from small to big, you divide. So, if you're going from seconds to minutes, minutes to hours, hours to days. Remember, you wouldn't go from, days to weeks. Remember, you wouldn't go from days to months because there are different numbers, so your math book is not going to have you do that this lesson. From days to years, weeks to years, or months to years, or anywhere in between that, you are going to divide. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's go ahead and get started on the book. Okay, so you should be on page 735 in your textbook. And let me tell you right now, we are going to be doing several different things today. There are going to be several different processes in order to find out several different types answer several different types of questions. So make sure that you are paying close attention, you are following every step that I give you, and you are writing anything that I write in the book, and you are following it and completing and answering the problems in that order. Do not tune out. Do not just watch without writing. Make sure that you are paying close attention and following along, because there are several different types of problems that we will be doing today. Okay, so first, let's read the sentences under the title. It says, the steps that you use to convert units of length, weight, and capacity can be used to convert units of time. And all that means is everything we've been doing up to this point with length, capacity, and weight, we're going to be doing the same thing today. But we're going to be adding in a couple other types of problems, just like I said. Okay, let's look at example 1. Before we actually look at example 1, I want to point out this key concept box. We already know this, but let's just go through it really quick, because this is pretty much exactly the same as what was on our conversion chart, but practice makes perfect, so let's look through it really quick. 1 minute is the same as 60 seconds. 1 hour is the same as 60 minutes. 1 day is the same as 24 hours. 1 week is the same as 7 days. And 1 year is the same as 52 weeks and 12 months. So that means there are 60 seconds in 1 minute, 60 minutes in 1 hour, 24 hours in 1 day, 7 days in 1 week, 52 weeks in 1 year, and 12 months in 1 year. So now that we've looked through that again really quickly, let's look at example 1. Finger or pencil on example 1. Read in your head while I read out loud. Cooper watched a butterfly in his garden for 5 minutes. How many seconds, oops, I forgot to put a box. How many seconds did he watch the butterfly? So what that means is we know there are 5 minutes, and we're trying to figure out how many seconds that is. So again, minutes are larger than seconds, so that means we're going from big to small, which means we will multiply. We start with what we know, which is 5 minutes, and then I want you to answer this yourself. I'm of course going to give the answer, but I want you to answer it yourself first. Are we going to multiply, we know 5 minutes, so are we going to multiply by the number of minutes in a minute, or the number of seconds in a minute? Of course, we're going to multiply by the number of seconds in a minute, which we know from our conversion charts is 60. Now, 5 times 60 is not a basic fact, but we can use basic facts and patterns to solve it. 5 times 6 is a basic fact. It equals 30. We have 1 0 at the end of our factors, so that means we're going to move it to the end of our product, which means that 5 times 60 is 300. So that means there are 300 seconds in 5 minutes, which means that Cooper watched a butterfly for 300 seconds. Okay, really quick, we're going to add an example 1.5. So let's see, you do have some space underneath the butterfly. For example, 1 and 1/2. And there's a reason we're doing it here instead of after example 2, which you will see in a little bit. So example 1.5 is 2 4/7 of weeks equals how many days? Okay, so first, let's look at this problem. We know weeks are larger than days, so we're going to be going from big to small, which means we'll multiply. But we have a mixed number. So what we need to do first is, remember that step 1 is to break the whole number apart, the mixed number apart into its whole and its fraction. And step 1 is to figure out how many days are in the whole. So we know we're multiplying. we start with what we know, which is 2 weeks. And then again, we multiply it by the number of days in a week, not the number of weeks in a week. There are 7 days in 1 week, so we're going to multiply by 7. 2 times 7 is 14, which means there are 14 days in 2 weeks. But we're not done yet, because now we have to do step 2, which is to figure out how many days are in 4/7 of a week. So remember, we do the same exact thing. We're going from big to small, so we're going to multiply. We start with what we know, which is 4/7 of a week. And then we multiply it by the number of days in a week, which is 7. Now, when we're multiplying fractions, we multiply the numerator by the whole number. 4 times 7 is 28. And then the denominator stays the same. So we have 28 sevenths. However, we can't use 28 sevenths to figure out how many days. So what we have to do is we have to turn this into either a mixed number or a whole number. So we're going to go to the side, and we're going to divide our numerator by our denominator. 7 goes into 28 4 times. 4 times 7 is 28. 28 minus 28 is 0. So that is 4 with a remainder of 0, which means that 4/7 of a week is equal to 4 days. Some of you may be noticing something about that. That's fine. I'm not going to say it out loud because it might confuse you if you don't notice it, but if you do notice that, you may use that to help you. Okay, now, step 3, I know that there are 14 days in 2 weeks, and there are 4 days in 4/7 of a week. So, to figure out how many days are in 2 and 4/7 of a week, I add the number of days in 2 weeks to the number of days in 4/7 of a week. 8/14 plus 4 is 18. So that means there are 18 days in 2 and 4/7 of a week. Now, we've done problems like that before, but I just wanted to practice it again because you will see some like that on maybe not today's independent practice, but definitely on the homework. Okay, so if you have any questions on the way we did example 1 or 1.5, then please reach out to me later, because now we're going to switch gears and we're going to try a new type of problem. So now as we get into example 2, this is where you really need to be paying close attention because we're doing a different type of problem. What we are going to have to use in this type of problem, we're going to have several steps. And the first step is we have to figure out how much time has passed when we're given 2 times. This is called elapsed time. If you are struggling with this and this problem is confusing you, we're going to do example 2, and then later on we're going to do a problem from the independent practice for some more practice altogether. But if you are struggling with the elapsed time part, there is an IXL. I'm pretty sure it's on the 4th grade tab. There's a chance it's on the 3rd grade tab, but I'm like 99% sure that it's on the 4th grade tab. And it's called something about elapsed time. Go ahead and look at that. It's under O or J, but I think it's O. Go ahead and look at that and practice a few problems on there if you're struggling with how to do this type of problem, even after we've gone over 2 of them. Do that first, because that is the part that we have not done yet and it could end up being the most confusing for you. So we're going to do example 2, and then we're going to do the guided practice and then a problem from the independent practice that uses elapsed time. If that elapsed time is very confusing for you and you feel like you might have some problems with it, go ahead and look up that IXL on elapsed time. I can't remember exactly which one it is. It's under O or J, but I'm pretty sure it's O, and it just has the words elapsed time in it. Okay, so example 2, finger or pencil on example 2. Read in your head while I read out loud. Audrey is going to watch a movie at the movie theater. The movie starts at 3:30 p.m. and ends at 5:37 p.m. How long is the movie in minutes? So we're not just figuring out how long the movie is, we then have to convert that into minutes. So, step 1, go ahead and write this. Step 1 is to find the time interval, or length of time, or elapsed time, from the start of the movie to the end of the movie. So that means we have to figure out how much time is between 3:30 and 5:37. Well, first we count the whole hours. So 3:30 to 5:30 is 2 hours. So we take off the minutes and we count the whole hours. 3:30 to 5:30 is 2 hours. Then we count the remaining minutes. From 5:30 to 5:37 is 7 minutes. So that means the whole movie, the time interval between 3:30 and 5:37, is 2 hours and 7 minutes. Because again, from 3:30 to 5:30 is 2 hours, and then from 5:30 to 5:37 is 7 minutes. So now we know that the movie is 2 hours and 7 minutes long. But that doesn't answer the question, because we're trying to figure out how long the whole movie is in minutes. Yes, this does have minutes in it, but that's not how long the whole movie is. So, what we have to do, step 2, is then to convert 2 hours and 7 minutes into minutes. So, let's go over here and set it up like the problems we're going to see. 2 hours and 7 minutes equals how many minutes? This problem is a lot like those fraction problems, except instead of breaking it into the whole and the fraction, we're breaking it into the hours and the minutes. So, step 1 is to convert those hours into minutes. So, 2 hours equals how many minutes? Well, hours are bigger than minutes, so we know we're multiplying. We start with what we know, which is 2 hours, and we're going to multiply it by the number of minutes in an hour, which we know from our conversion chart is 60. 2 times 60, we can use basic facts and patterns. 2 times 6 is 12. We have 1 0 at the end of our factor, so we're going to move it to the end of our product. So that means that 2 hours is the same as 120 minutes. Now, step 2, we don't have to convert these minutes to minutes. They already are minutes. So this is where it's a little easier than the fractions, because when we had a mixed number, well, then we had to convert the fraction. And then we would add how many minutes were in the hour and how many minutes were in the fraction. This time, we don't have to convert this. We already know, so we can just go ahead and add the minutes in an hour, which is 120, to our minutes that are left over, which is 7. 120 plus 7 equals 127, which means that the whole movie is 127 minutes long. Because we know that in 2 hours, we multiply 2 hours times 60 minutes to get 120. Then we add the number of minutes in 2 hours to the number of minutes that are left over. 120 plus 7 is 127. So the movie is 127 minutes long. Now we will do another practice problem with that, but this one, the part that might be most confusing to you is step 1. Step 2 is exactly what we've been doing with the mixed numbers, except that you don't have to convert that fraction. You already know how many minutes are in that second part. We will do another practice problem on that after we complete the guided practice. Before we start the guided practice, make sure that you have a separate sheet of paper out. You will not have to use it for every problem, but you will have to use it for a lot. So make sure you have a separate sheet of paper out. Make sure it comes from your clean paper binder, not any of your notebooks. And then let's go ahead and start at number 1. The directions for this part say complete each conversion table. Well, number 1, we have minutes and we're trying to convert it to seconds. So let's figure out our equations. and then we'll solve them. We'll figure out, after we figure out the equations, then we'll see if we need to solve them on a separate sheet of paper. Well, we know minutes, and we're trying to find seconds. Minutes are larger than seconds, so we're going from big to small, which means we're going to multiply. Make sure that every time you have a conversion chart, you show your equation to the side. We always start with what we know, so our first factor is the number of minutes. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and 4 minutes. Our second factor, are we going to multiply by the number of minutes in a minute? There is 1 minute in 1 minute. Or are we going to multiply by the number of seconds in a minute? There are 60 seconds in 1 minute. Well, of course, we're going to multiply by the number of seconds in a minute. Otherwise, we'd end up with the same number, which we know can't be true, because seconds are smaller than minutes, not equal. So, there are 60 seconds in 1 minute. So, I'm going to go ahead and multiply by 60 each time. These are not basic facts, but we can solve them using basic facts and patterns, so I do not have to go to my separate sheet of paper for number 1. Okay, 1 times 60, the basic fact is 1 times 6, which is 6. Then put a 0 at the end. So in 1 minute, there are 60 seconds. The next one, 2 times 60. Basic fact is 2 times 6, which equals 12. Then we move the 0 from the end of the factor to the end of the product. So in 2 minutes, there are 120 seconds. Next one, 3 times 60. Well, the basic fact is 3 times 6, which equals 18. Then we move the 0 from the end of the factor to the end of the product, which means that in 3 minutes, there are 180 seconds. The last one for this table, 4 times 60. The basic fact is 4 times 6, which equals 24. Then we move the 0 from the end of the factor to the end of the product, which means that in 4 minutes, there are 240 seconds. Okay. So anytime you can use basic facts or basic facts and patterns, you do not need to go to a separate sheet of paper, unless you have to move between units. But minutes and seconds are right next to each other, so we don't have to do that. We can do it in one step. We don't have to go from seconds to minutes to hours. We can solve this in one step. Now number 2, our conversion chart has hours and days. What we've normally been doing is going from left to right, which if we were going from left to right, hours are small and days are big, which means we'd be going from small to big, which would mean we're dividing. But if we look at this, do we know the small unit? No, we don't. We know the larger unit. So even though they're flipped, we're still going from big to small, which means that we're still multiplying. Hours and days are right next to each other on the chart, so that means we can solve this in one step. We don't have to go to any unit in between. We're going from big to small, so we're going to multiply each time. Now, our first factor, we always start with what we know, and we know the number of days. So we have 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and 4 days. Now, we need to figure out our second factor. Are we going to multiply by the number of days in a day or the number of hours in a day? Well, of course, the number of hours in a day. Our conversion chart tells us that there are 24 hours in 1 day. So we're going to multiply our number of days by the number of hours in a day to solve our problem. Now this first one, it's not a basic fact, but we can use the identity property of multiplication to solve it. We know that any number times 1 equals itself. So that means that 24 hours are in 1 day. Number 2, this is not a basic fact. We cannot use a property of multiplication to solve it. So that means we need to go to our separate sheet of paper to solve the rest, to set them up and down, and solve the rest. So now we have 2 times 24. I'm going to put the number with more digits at the top. It just makes it easier for me. And then I'm going to multiply. 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times 2 is 4. So that means 2 times 24 is 48. So there are 48 hours in 2 days. Now the next one, we have 3 times 24. Again, we need to come over to our separate sheet of paper. I'm going to put the number with more digits at the top. So I have 24 times 3. 3 times 4 is 12. Regroup the 1 to the tens place. 3 times 2 is 6. Plus 1 is 7, which means that 3 times 24 is 72. So there are 72 hours in 3 days. Now the last one for this chart, we're trying to figure out the number of hours in 4 days. I'm going to set it up so my number with more digits is at the top. 4 times 4 is 16. Regroup the 1 to the tens place. 4 times 2 is 8. Plus 1 is 9. So 4 times 24 is 96. And there are 96 hours in 4 days. Okay, number 3. We know the years. We're trying to find the weeks. Those are right next to each other on our chart, or they're not right next to each other on our chart. But our conversion chart does tell us the number of weeks in a year, so we can solve that in one step. Years are larger than weeks, so we're going to multiply each time. And we're going to start with what we know, which is the number of years. We have 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and 4 years. Now, we need to figure out, are we multiplying by the number of years in a year or weeks in a year? Well, of course, we're going to multiply by the number of weeks in a year, which our conversion chart tells us is 52. There are 52 weeks in 1 year, so we're going to multiply each of these by 52. Okay, we can solve this first one using the identity property. 1 times 52 is 52. So in 1 year, there are 52 weeks. Okay, the next one, that is not a basic fact, and we can't solve it with any property or by using basic facts and patterns, so we're going to come over to our separate sheet of paper, and we're going to solve the rest of them up and down. I'm going to go ahead and write all the problems that I'm about to solve. I need to solve 52 times 2, 52 times 3, and 52 times 4. Now I can go ahead and solve. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 5 is 10, which means that 2 times 52 is 104. So in 2 years, there are 104 weeks. The next one, 2 times 3 is 6. 3 times 5 is 15. So that means 3 times 52 is 156. So in 3 years, there are 156 weeks. And the last one, 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 5 is 20. So that means 4 times 52 is 208, which means that in 4 years, there are 208 weeks. Okay, so again, make sure whenever you're doing conversion charts, write your equation to the side. Then, if you're using basic facts or basic facts and patterns, you can just go ahead and solve. If you have problems that you cannot solve using basic facts and patterns, just basic facts, or a multiplication property, then you need to solve it on a separate sheet of paper. Do not be lazy and not do that, because if I get your homework and you have not done it on a separate sheet of paper, well then I'm going to think, oh, this person must have used a calculator. Or I'm going to think, wow, they did their work right here, now I can't read any of their answers. So you're going to lose points. Make sure that you show your work on a separate sheet of paper unless you only have to use basic facts and patterns, or a multiplication property like the identity property. Other than that, show your work on your separate sheet of paper or else you will lose points, because either one, you don't have anywhere, so I might think, oh, they used a calculator, I guess I'll take off points, that's not helping them. or it's going to be right there on the piece of paper and I'm on your homework sheet and I'm not going to be able to read anything, and then I'm going to take off points there. And then you might lose more points in that case because then I can't read your answers, then I count your answer wrong too. So on top of not showing your work or showing your work incorrectly, then you've lost points because I can't read your answer and so I count it wrong. Please just do this and make sure that you use a separate sheet of paper from your clean paper binder, not your one of your notebooks. I do not want that frilly stuff. There are some teachers that will just throw it away. They won't even look at it. I will look at it, but I will not be happy about it, and just imagine what that might be. Okay, so let's go ahead. We're going to do a problem from the independent practice together. Okay, so now let's look at the guided practice at number 14. We're going to do this one together. Number 14 says how many minutes are in the time interval from 1:22 p.m. to 5:44 p.m. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over our separate sheet of paper and underneath number 3, go ahead and have number 14. And now we have to figure out how much time is between 1:22 and 5:44. So first we're going to figure out the hours. Well, from 1:22 to 5:22 is, let's see, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5. So that is 4 hours. Between 1:22 and 5:22 is 4 hours. So to solve that, all I did was I took my first time, and then I made my second time have the same number of minutes, because it comes before 5:44. Now I have to figure out how many minutes are between 5:22 and 5:44. To do that, I just subtract 22 from 44. 4 minus 2, and the reason I did that was because 44 is just bigger than 22. So I just subtract the minutes, and I just always have to start with the larger minutes. 4 minus 2 is 2, 4 minus 2 is 2. So that means from 1:22 to 5:44 is 4 hours and 22 minutes. So between 1:22 and 5:44 is 4 hours and 22 minutes. Now that was step 1. Okay, now step 2 is I have to convert 4 hours and 22 minutes to minutes. And now what I'm going to do first is I'm going to break these apart. So first I'm going to figure out 4 hours is equal to how many minutes? Well, I know hours are bigger than minutes, so I'm going to multiply. I'm going to start with what I know, which is 4 hours. And then I'm going to multiply it by the number of minutes in an hour, which because of my conversion chart I know is 60. So now I have 4 times 60. I can do this using basic facts and patterns. 4 times 6 is 24. I have 1 0 at the end of my factor, so I'm going to put it at the end of my product. And now I know that 4 hours has 240 minutes. That's not the answer to my question because I also have this 22 minutes. Well, unlike the fractions, I don't have to convert this. This 22 minutes is already in the unit I'm trying to get to. So now all I have to do is take the number of minutes in 4 hours, which is 240, and then add the number of minutes I have left over, which is 22. 240 plus 22, I know there's no regrouping, so I can just go place by place. 0 plus 2 is 2, 4 plus 2 is 6, 2 plus nothing is 2. So that means there are 262 minutes in the time interval from 1:22 p.m. to 5:44 p.m. You know what? We're going to go ahead and do number 15 together too, because a lot of the word problems on your independent practice and quite a bit of your homework is solving these types of problems. So I think we need to go ahead and do one more practice problem, and then the rest I think you can do on your own. Just remember, if you are struggling with this time interval thing, go ahead and look up the IXL on elapsed time. But now make sure you have everything that I have for number 14, because I'm going to erase to do number 15. Oops, oh my gosh, I just realized, number 14, what did I forget? Can't believe it. I forgot the unit. That would have been minus a point for me. But luckily I remembered before we finished. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and do number 15. Now I left my step 1 and step 2 because I'm still going to have to do those same steps. So number 15 says, how many minutes are in the time interval from 7:09 a.m. to 10:36 a.m.? Well, I'm going to do the same thing I did on number 14. I'm going to start with my first time, so 7:09, and I'm going to figure out how many hours are between 7:09, and then I'm going to take my hour here, but use the same number of minutes, to 10:09. So from 7:09 to 10:09, let's see how many hours. 7 to 8, 8 to 9, 9 to 10. So, there are 3 hours from 7:09 to 10:09. Now I have to figure out how many minutes are left over. So, from 10:09, which is where I ended here, to 10:36. All I have to do is subtract the minutes. I'm not going to say 9 minus 36 because you can't do that. But I can do 36 minus 9. Okay, I can't do 6 minus 9, so I need to take 1 away from the tens. That becomes a 2. Give it to the ones. That becomes 16. 16 minus 9 is 7. 2 minus nothing is 2. So that means from 10:09 to 10:36 is 27 minutes. Now I'm ready for step 2 because I know that there are 3 hours and 27 minutes that I need to convert to minutes. So 3 hours and 27 minutes is equal to how many minutes? Well, again, I'm going to figure out the number of minutes in the full hours first. Hours are bigger than minutes, so I'm going to multiply. I know I have 3 hours, and I know I need to multiply it by the number of minutes in an hour, which is 60. I can use basic facts and patterns to solve that. Oh, whoops, I forgot. Let's do this. Sorry. 3 hours is equal to how many minutes? Again, I know I'm multiplying, and I'm starting with 3 hours. I know I'm multiplying by the number of minutes in an hour, which is 60. I can use basic facts and patterns. 3 times 6 is 18. There's 1 0 at the end of my factors, so I'm going to put 1 0 at the end of my product. So 3 hours has 180 minutes. Now I'm not done yet because that's just how many is in 3 hours. I need to figure out how many is in 3 hours and 27 minutes. I don't have to convert 27 minutes because I already know 27 minutes is equal to 27 minutes. So I'm going to take the number of minutes in 3 hours, which is 180, add the number of minutes that are in 27 minutes, which is of course 27. Now, this one I will need to regroup, so I'm going to go ahead and set it up and down. 180 plus 27. 7 plus 0 is 7. 8 plus 2 is 10. Regroup the 1 to the hundreds place. 1 plus nothing is 1. Plus 1 is 2, which means that 3 hours and 27 minutes is equal to 207 minutes. So, 207 minutes have passed in the time interval from 7:09 a.m. to 10:36 a.m. Okay, and that's how you solve it. It's not hard math. It's not difficult math. there's just multiple steps. So you have to make sure that you do the multiple steps. Again, if you are struggling with this time interval thing, look up the IXL on elapsed time and that will help you out. I promise you. I promise you it will help. If you want to do all the problems that are just conversions, go ahead and do that. And then you can save the time interval problems for a little later after you work on that IXL. It will help you because even if you get it wrong, IXL tells you why you got it wrong and how to solve it. So that will help you. When you're working on IXL and you get a wrong problem, I think a lot of you do this, but make sure you look at why you got it wrong, because then it'll help you the next time to not make the same mistake. Okay, so now we're done with all the problems we're going to do together. Let's go ahead and look at the independent practice and the homework so I can tell you where to look to help you out. So numbers 4 through 7 are conversion charts. You can look at the guided practice to help you with that. Make sure that if you are doing problems where you can't use basic facts and patterns, or the identity property, that you are solving it on a separate sheet of paper like you did with number 2 and 3. Otherwise, you will lose points. Numbers 8 through 10 are comparisons. Remember, when you compare, take the larger unit, convert it to the smaller unit, and then compare the seconds to the seconds. It is really hard to compare minutes to seconds, but if you convert those 5 minutes to however many seconds it is, it'll be much easier to convert the number of seconds in to compare the number of seconds in 5 minutes to 250 seconds. So change one of them so that they're both in the same unit. I would change the larger unit to a smaller unit. It is just a lot easier that way. And then compare those answers. Numbers 11 and 12 you can solve just by looking at your conversion chart. 11 through 13 you can solve by looking at your conversion chart. 14 and 15 we've already solved. Look at the back. Numbers 16 through 18 are word problems. Some of them all you're doing is just conversions. Some of them you might be comparing. Some of them you might be doing these time interval problems. Numbers 20 and 21 are reasoning and critical thinking, so you need to use what you already know and what you've learned today to help you solve these problems or answer these questions. Remember, critical thinking will most likely not have a number in it. It is just your thoughts on how to answer these questions. Okay, now let's look at the homework. Numbers 1 through 10 are just straight conversions. Make sure that you write the equation underneath. If you are doing anything other than basic facts and patterns, or the identity property, you need to solve it on a separate sheet of paper. Numbers 11 and 12 are conversion tables again, so you're going to solve them the same way you did number 1 and 2 on the guided practice. Make sure you have the equation to the side and then solve it on a separate sheet of paper. Numbers 13 through 15, some of them are just conversions, some of them are time intervals. Make sure you show your work on a separate sheet of paper if you need to show work. Don't forget units. I forgot to say this on the independent practice. Do not forget units, otherwise you will lose points. Most of you on your homework are doing a really great job doing units. Some of you, here and there, you forget, so make sure, just pay close attention to that. Number 16 is vocabulary, but you're not going to be using a word. You're going to be looking at your conversion chart to figure that out. And then number 17 is just a conversion, but you do need to solve it on your separate sheet of paper. Okay, that's it for math today. If you have any questions, please reach out to me today between 1 and 5, and I'll help you out. Remember, I solve these problems on the board so that when you get to a problem that's just like it and you're having trouble, you can look at the ones we've already solve it the same exact way, following the same exact steps. You just replace the numbers with what you have there. Okay, go ahead and get started.